Hello guys and welcome back to the Traitors, and today we have got a lot to talk about. There has been some incredible game playing, another person was murdered, and another person was banished at the round table. Honestly, this episode was jam-packed from the start to the end, and my goodness, it did not let up for a second. So, if you guys are enjoying, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, do all that YouTube stuff you do so well. Pop in the comments how you're feeling about this series. Who do you like? Who do you want to win? What kind of gameplay would you employ if you're a traitor or a faithful? And let's get straight into the video, shall we? Let's go. So, we're going to start with the breakfast, because obviously at the end of the last episode we were left on the cliffhanger. Who did they kill? Did they kill Zach or did they kill Charlie? The smart person to kill was Charlie, I personally think, because Zach's very good at throwing accusations towards people that aren't necessarily guilty. I know he was throwing it towards Paul, but that's because it was kind of obvious it was Paul towards the end. And I think they definitely made the right decision axing Charlie in the nicest way possible. She wasn't really adding much to the game, and I also think that she had some just weird theories that were not being picked up by other people. So, like, for example, Jazz has some crazy theories sometimes. Most of them are pretty true, but people end up catching on to them, and then it starts to snowball from there. Whereas with Charlie, that never really happened. She would always piggyback off of other people, and let's face it, she was never going to get voted out around the round table. But voting out Charlie did allow Harry and Andrew to kind of pin the blame a little bit more on Charlotte and make Charlotte seem a little bit more suspicious, because obviously Charlotte's not been in people's good books. They think that she's a little bit suspicious. They think that she might have been recruited, because obviously they know someone has been recruited. And I think people are starting to get a little bit suspicious of people who they previously thought were faithful. And Charlotte, the best move she could have done was to kill her best friend and then be like, oh, my best friend. Oh, that's so sad. That's such a shame. And I think that's a really good strategy. It's obviously not what happened, but it's a good strategy. And some other little things that I noticed. Charlotte thinks that Jasmine was recruited. Harry feels like Andrew is now more of a teammate than Paul was, which I think is interesting. And Ross brings up the fact that Jazz couldn't be a traitor because he's been gunning for Paul the entire time, and therefore it wouldn't make sense for him to be a traitor. And then someone was like, well, what if he's been turned? What then? And then Ross was like, yeah, I don't really think about that, but it still doesn't make much sense. I do agree actually with Ross that there's an overwhelming amount of evidence that proves that it isn't Jazz. But then again, it could be anyone with the whole recruiting situation, especially because no one's come out and said, yeah, I haven't been recruited. It's an interesting dynamic. Interestingly, Molly was questioning why Harry wasn't murdered, and I thought, oh my god, the one time when Molly actually decides that she's going to think about the game and how to play it, and then she just doesn't run with that thought. She had the thought of, it's weird that Harry sat here when he literally just got rid of a traitor. That's very strange. But anyway, let's move on, because then immediately Harry was planting thoughts in her brain going, do you think it might be Charlie? Do you think it might be Charlotte? That could be an interesting strategy. Harry's playing a bit of a blinder of a game, because no one really suspects him currently. There's accusations being thrown around, but nothing genuinely concrete. So, before the mission started, Jazz was asked on his opinions, but he kind of just went, I'm not going to say them in public. I'm gonna tell them to the people I trust. And so he pulled Zach and Evie aside for a chat, and it sounds like Love Island, doesn't it? And I thought it was really interesting because the names that he was throwing out there were actually on good basis. He pulled out Ross's name and was obviously like, I think he's been turned. I think that's why he was trying to help Paul out in the previous round table, and then he also brought up Harry's name. And this was all leading back to the conversation that Paul had with him when Paul was like, look, I know you said XYZ. I know you said that this like I know you said that if I die tonight, it's Paul. And Harry told me that. And Jazz was like, that's very interesting. So I told 3 people that: Jasmine, Ross, and Harry. And the other 2 kept their promise, but Harry didn't. And I think the only place that kind of chat would have happened would have been in the traitor turret. So I actually think that Paul had been planting seeds for a lot longer than anyone actually suspected, because it seems like a really, really bad move that he would drop Harry's name in it like that, because that's currently the only thing that Jazz has to go off of. Evie and Zach, they weren't on board with the idea. They were sort of like, I feel like you're clutching at straws here, mate. Like, come on, it's a bit ridiculous. But he's bang on the money, and genuinely, Jazzatha Christie does not miss, and it's actually quite funny to watch, I won't lie, because he is so right in his suspicions. At least one of, well, actually, well, I'll get more onto that later, but he just, oh my goodness, he's just on a different level. He's genuinely one of the best faithful this game has ever seen, ever. It's crazy. Charlotte also thinks it's Jasmine. She was talking to Ross about this, and it's because Jasmine went after Jazz and then went after Paul when she was voting, which was a bit odd, and that will definitely come up a little bit later on. So the mission was very, very interesting. I thought it was actually quite a fun one. It did remind me a little bit of a Bush Tucker trial, just without the bugs and the creepy crawlies. And I think there's been a lot of talk about like how it proves that a civilian version of I'm a Celebrity would work. You could literally call I'm a civilian, get me out of here. That's literally what you could call it. It's literally right there in front of you. Ant and Dec, come on. Anyway, so it was an interesting challenge. They were taken to the cabin in the woods. I remember the cabin in the woods from last time, and it was basically like an escape room. And I thought, yeah, cool. That sounds like quite fun. The issue is they had to. There was a light. It's so hard to describe. You had to crawl down into tunnels, but the tunnels were in darkness. So someone had to stay up and turn the lights on, but then that plunged the cabin into darkness, so they couldn't read the map. So it became a bit of like in order to read the map, you guys need to be in darkness. But in order for you guys to see where you're going, we need to be in darkness. That kind of backwards and forwards. It wasn't a bad mission. It was actually quite exhilarating at times. There was some nice moments, including Harry keeping a shield secret. He grabbed the shield when he noticed it, kept it a secret. I'll talk more on that a little bit towards the end. And they were told that anybody left in the cabin at the end of the challenge would mean that they had like 1,000 taken off of whatever they earned from the challenge. So they only ended up winning five grand, and I think that was with the minus 1,000. Very interesting, because we're now up to, I think, 65,150 or something along those lines, and Evie was the person that got left behind, because obviously for the others to go through the tunnel, she had to stay behind and hold the lights on, otherwise there was absolutely no hope. Yeah, honestly, a very, very entertaining mission. I was kind of pottering doing my room at the time, so I wasn't really paying attention to every single moment, but I did notice the shield, and I gotta say, Harry keeping that a secret is probably the best thing he could have probably done at this point. I called it immediately, but I literally wrote, the smart play here is to recruit, and then the next day when everyone turns up to breakfast, be like, I must have gotten killed, or I must have been targeted because I had a shield. And I think that's the smart way to play this game, if I'm being 100% honest. I will talk more about that plan later, because that is what they end up doing. But I'll talk about sort of how fair that is within the game, because Yeah, it's a little bit of a controversial one if I'm being 100% honest, I won't lie. So, yeah. So, in a rather cruel twist of fate, people are starting to suspect Harry a little bit. I think it was Evie, Ross, and Jazz. They were sitting around and they were talking about whether they think he's actually capable of being a traitor and coming up with all these elaborate plans to get rid of other traitors and things like that. Oh, it's tough because like I really don't want Harry to get found out. He's playing an absolutely blinding game currently, and he is currently king of the traitors, which is crazy. So, yeah, it's a tough one because you'd think that it's now starting to get to the point where there's only 9 people left, and therefore the odds of the faithful winning are getting slimmer and slimmer and slimmer and slimmer. With every faithful they knock out, it's getting slimmer and slimmer. So I don't know. It's a tough one because I really, really do think that I do think Harry's going to get found out, but I don't want him to. We've still got 3 episodes left. Anything could happen. Episode 10 last time was when Amanda got caught out. So I guess we'll just have to wait and see whether Harry gets caught out this time. But it is what it is. But I do think Harry's playing a good game, and he continued doing that by taking Zach and Jazz to one side and being like, yo, I trust you two. So here I got the shield. Okay. So, and then I think he went one step too far and was like, oh, I hope I get targeted so that we all turn up in the morning. Because he's almost writing it into existence, if that makes sense. Like, because he knows that's what's going to happen. That's his plan. But by saying it, I just think it makes him look a little bit suspicious. Like, it's going to happen and they're going to be like, he said that was going to happen. That's a bit strange, isn't it? Very interesting. But it is what it is. We're on to the round table. Let's go. So this was a frustratingly short round table, and I think it was frustratingly short because they kind of only really focused on 2 people. They they briefly brought up Jazz's name and kind of went, Jazz, we still think you're suspicious. And then it was immediately back to like the main 2 people that this whole thing was about. It's interesting because it started with Zach saying that he thinks that Paul might have turned Charlotte, and Charlotte counteracting that by saying that Jazz might have been turned. And it's interesting that they're all sort of clinging to the, oh, we think you might have been turned, we think you might have been turned kind of thing, because I don't think any of their actions have changed enough since the recruitment happened for them to really have a basis other than, oh, we think. There's no hard evidence showing that either of them have changed, either Charlotte or Jazz, or Ross to a certain extent, although Ross did start just randomly defending Paul after Miles was voted out in a way that no one else was. So I don't know. But it isn't looking good for Charlotte because Charlotte is one of these people. She's 100% faithful, right? She just is. But she has this sort of way of talking at a round table that makes her seem guilty because the entire time it just feels like she's on the defensive constantly. And obviously it's not helping her case when people are giving her good points and then she's sort of firing back and diverting blame almost. So she switched it up on Jasmine, brought up Jasmine's name, and I thought it was interesting because Jasmine was talking and then Charlotte tried to interrupt her, and then Jasmine just turned around and went, when you were talking, did I interrupt you? And I was like, ooh. I think that's the second time this series that something involving Jazz has been a little bit like a moment. Like the first one was with Anthony when he was like, are you finished speaking? And Jasmine was like, ah. And this time Charlotte was like, ah. Yeah, it was a very, very funny moment, or it just caught me off guard. I was like, oh man, that's crazy. And then Jasmine was basically arguing like, Charlotte, you're being defensive. And I was like, rightfully so. She's innocent. She knows she's innocent. Of course she's going to be defensive. I would be I would be worried about the people who aren't defensive, like Paul was. Like Miles was defensive because it was Paul, but I would be looking at like people who are playing just as good a game as Paul, okay? Because like if Paul can do it, other people can do it. That's the crazy part. So I don't know. I don't know whether going for Charlotte was the best idea for the faithful in this scenario. But Molly started to bring up the fact that Charlotte was suddenly very upset over Charlie's death, and it almost seems like a diversion tactic. And it was uncomfortable to sit there whilst Molly was like, "Oh well, she was only your best friend when it mattered to aid your game or whatever." And I was like, "Oh, that's a little bit of a dodgy one," because Charlotte was like, "Look, she's not my best friend in the whole world. She's just my best friend in here." And yet, it did suck seeing her go home today, but it is what it is. Like, there's not really much I can do. But I feel like someone's blaming it on me. They're pinning this part on me, which obviously they are. And then Molly turned the attention to Jazz and was like, "Look, I'm not happy with the fact that you keep pulling people for private chats, and whenever people ask about your opinions, you're always like, I'm not going to say them out in public, and then you go tell people behind their backs. Like, it's just not okay." And Jazz was like, "Yeah, I do that because I trust the people I talk to," which, like, I get. There are, like, Andrew said the same thing. Andrew said, like, I only talk to the people I trust. So I feel like it's a case of Molly just doesn't have that many people she can trust, or she's too trusting, that kind of thing. I don't know, one of the two. But then Zach brought up the switcher votes, the switcheroo, the fact that Jasmine was gunning for Jazz the entirety of the last round table, and then at the last minute when the voting came up, she voted for Paul. And Zach's argument was that it almost looks like she worked out the vibe of the room and decided to vote with the crowd, so she blended in, which I think is a very, very interesting observation from Zach. It's a wrong observation, but it is an interesting one nonetheless. So that was literally the round table. I was really, really expecting it to be a lot longer, but it wasn't, and it kind of came down to Jasmine versus Charlotte, I guess. So let's take a look at the voting. So the voting was as follows: Charlotte voted for Jasmine, Jazz voted for Charlotte, Harry voted for Charlotte, Zach voted for Jasmine, Molly voted for Jazz. Why? Andrew voted for Charlotte, Jasmine voted for Charlotte, Ross voted for Charlotte, Evie voted for Charlotte. It came down to Charlotte with 6 votes, Jasmine with 2, Jazz with 1. Tough. I really, really thought... I thought Charlotte was going to go a lot earlier. I think they were right not to kill her because obviously she did get banished, and she was a good pick to get banished. It's tough because she didn't deserve this. She was framed, and the suspicion was piled on purely because Charlie died. So, good move from the traitors, if I'm being 100% honest. I don't think there was a lot of suspicion prior to that, obviously, because this whole recruitment thing happened. They're really looking in the wrong way. They haven't even brought up the fact that Andrew could have been turned. But I think that's because he plays such a dumb, clueless game, both as a traitor and as a faithful. So I don't know. It's a bit of a tough one, but it is what it is. Bye-bye, Charlotte. We will miss you. You were horrendous at finding traitors. You always had some wild theories, and you were incredibly funny. I will never ever forget the fact that when they were planning to kill you one night, the producers decided to include a shot of you in the bath. That was hysterical to me, but it is what it is. Big love. Bye-bye, Charlotte. I feel like now people are leaving. It's getting tougher and tougher to say goodbye because I've now been watching them for so long. So yeah, bye-bye, Charlotte. We'll miss you. So, after the round table, people were questioning Jasmine. People were also questioning Ross. And then Jazz was like, I still think it's Ross. And Andrew was kind of jumping on that and being like, yeah, I agree. But he's still sus of Harry. Jazz is, obviously. Now, getting up into the turret, there was a choice in front of them. And I think it was the smart choice to recruit someone. Now, if we look at everybody that's left, you've got Molly, Evie, Zach, who else? Jazz, and Ross. Those 5 people left, right? No, there's someone else as well. Jasmine. Did I say Jasmine? I think so. Those 6. Out of those 6, the 3 people who I would not recruit are Ross, Jazz, Jasmine. Because those 3 have a chance of being voted out at the round table. The people I would be looking at to recruit would be Zach, Evie, Molly. Because they are untouchable, basically. Nobody believes they're a traitor. No one believes they are anything but faithful. So the best thing they could do in this double bluff of the traitors tried to kill me last night, but I had a shield plan, is to recruit someone they definitely know is a faithful, or they are certain is a faithful. Because their plan hinges on, so there's 8 people left now, right? If 3 of them are traitors, 5 of them are innocent, right? That's how the maths work. If they manage to get rid of a faithful and murder a faithful, it's a 3v3. That means they've won the game, essentially, from the end of episode 10, which is crazy to me. So unless the traitors get out another person in the next episode, the faithful get out another traitor in the next episode, they've lost the game, which is crazy to me. Do I think it's unfair? Absolutely, I think it's unfair. I think you should have one recruitment and one recruitment only. Or you can only recruit again when there's one person. That kind of thing. Because currently, when you're taken down to 2 and then you're recruiting again, it just tips the scales so unevenly in the other direction. It didn't help that there were 4 to start off with. So I don't know whether there should be like a maximum number of times you can recruit on 2 players. Whether it's like when you get down to 2, you can recruit. When you get down to 1, you can recruit again. That kind of thing. That's the vibe I'd be playing with currently. But it is what it is. There's not really much we can do about it. So I think it's important to note that those 3 are the smart options. They decided to go for Ross. I can only see this ending badly for them, if I'm being 100% honest. There's no situation that I can think of where recruiting Ross doesn't end poorly for them. And Claudia made a joke about it being a man's club and about only men being the traitor, and I was like, yeah, fairs, it is that. But also, I don't know what it was about. Like, the women last year were so strong and fierce, and then this year I feel like we've gotten so many of like the women that are just kind of like, they don't really add much. Like, we had Evie, Charlie, Molly, I kind of just those 3 really that just didn't really add anything. Like, Evie's adding more now, so's Molly, but I think it's because the group's gotten smaller, so they have to. Otherwise, like, in fact, did Evie say anything at that last round table? At the round table in this episode? I don't remember her saying anything at all. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. But Ross did accept it, came up to the turret and was like, oh my god, it's you guys. Ah! And then he was like, oh, I want to know some of your reasonings behind some of the killings. Why Diane? I really thought he was going to tell him that was his mum. Which, if you're playing to win, I would have done, but I don't know. It's a bit of a sticky one, because you know you can trust these people. But then also they might turn on you. I don't know. Oh, it's a tough one. It's a tough one. It's a tough one. But he asked Harry why Diane, and Harry said the worst thing he could have possibly said, which was she was getting too smart, so we put her in her place. Oh, it's tough because now I feel like Ross is going to try and get some revenge, and Harry could be in the firing line. Ah, tough one. Well, we're going to have to wait until next Wednesday. So, until then, thank you guys very, very much for watching. I will see you later. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, do all that YouTube stuff. And I will see you guys later. Keep on ranting. Bye now.